What's your excuse? Is the question slash theme for this video. So a couple of Christmases ago, I volunteered for Crisis, which is a charity in the UK focused on homelessness. And every Christmas, and this is like a year-long project of theirs. It takes them a year to prepare for the Christmas period, where they rent out hotels across the city and they use those to temporarily accommodate a number of homeless people that they're aware of that are kind of in their system. And they use that opportunity to give them accommodation, but also give them surrounding welfare support and try to get them onto a positive onward journey, whether that means like securing them accommodation, whether that means medical or mental health support, refugee or migration, or whatever it may be. And I found this like a really eye-opening experience because I associated homelessness with rough sleeping, but actually the majority of people that are homeless, at least in this country, are not rough sleeping. They're in kind of like temporary accommodation. They might be in hotels. They might be in like sleeping in friends or families' places, like sofa surfing. Uh, and most of the people who were housed in the hotel that I was working in were also, yeah, not rough sleepers really, not the majority of them anyway. And so it was eye-opening in many ways, but that was one of the ways that I was educated. And when you volunteer for them, there are a number of roles within the hotels anyway. You could be serving food, preparing it. You could be doing like pastoral stuff. You could be setting up events and coordinating stuff, a real range. And I was in the office in more of like a coordination role on this occasion, and I'd gone out to spend a bit of time like speaking to some of the guests. And I got talking to this one guy during dinner, and he was homeless, but he was also working. He was a chef, um, and he'd worked that day, and he was having his dinner in the hotel, and we got chatting over boxing because he's a big boxing fan, as am I. And he was telling me about how he trains, and he says he trains daily, or he said he trains daily. He shadow boxes, he practices this jab, his cross. And I said, oh, like, do you go to a boxing gym or anything like that? And he said, no, I do it in my room. And I was really taken aback by that. I know people spend like, when you're waiting for the kettle to boil, people who train in boxing, you might have you might shadow box for a little bit, but this guy was properly training in his bedroom, boxing. He couldn't afford to get a gym membership, like and train at a boxing gym or whatever. Um, and yeah, I know they're cheap, and actually there's some places that will let you train for free. But when you're homeless, and I imagine you've got other priorities than like a boxing membership. And I was really taken aback by that. And what it makes me think of is I think people ask, you often will get asked, or I get asked, you might even ask other people, who inspires you? And it's really tempting to resort to mentioning really famous people, eminent people, Muhammad Ali or whatever, it's the first name that came in my head because we're talking about boxing. And yeah, of course he's inspiring. He put aside sporting glory and went to prison for his political beliefs, came out of prison and carried on, being one of the most incredible boxers the world's ever seen. Of course, that's somebody who qualifies as being an inspiring person. But there's also ordinary people that inspire me. The extraordinary in the ordinary. People like the guy that I met, who through the simple act of dedicating himself to this craft, of doing it in his bedroom, no one was telling him to do it. He did it because he he wants to get good at something, and the best he's got is just the time and the space in that room. And I'd actually totally forgotten about that, but I've certainly had moments where, you know, I've really got to heave myself to go down the boxing gym or whatever, and there I've got the luxury. I've got the luxury of training partners. I've got the luxury of coaches. I've got the luxury of really expensive heavy bags and all this fancy equipment. And you know, still, sometimes I've got to dig deep to go. And I think, you know, had I remembered this person, it probably would have made it much easier for me to stick my trainers on and head out the door and go and train, because, you know, it really would put the luxury of the my privilege into perspective. So I'd totally forgotten about this guy, and it really made me reflect on, you know, who, I suppose, where I get my inspiration from. And it doesn't necessarily need to be like these grand people. It could be like your ordinary Joe. You know, they might have a story or a particularly positive habit that they do. So yeah, you can learn from anyone really. So yeah, just wanted to share that. Take care.